Karoline Leavitt was a woman who exuded grace and confidence. She had always been the kind of person who took charge of her life, whether it was managing her career or nurturing her relationships. Her marriage to James Leavitt, the owner of one of the most prestigious hotels in town, was something she cherished deeply. Together they had built a life filled with love, trust, and shared dreams. But lately, Karoline couldn't shake off the feeling that their relationship had fallen into a predictable rhythm. The spark that once defined their connection seemed to have dimmed, replaced by the comfort of routine. It wasn't that they were unhappy, far from it, but she missed the excitement and spontaneity that had once been such a big part of their lives. One evening, as Karoline sat sipping tea in their cozy living room, an idea began to form in her mind. What if she could do something unexpected? Something that would remind both her and James of the early days when every moment together felt like an adventure. The thought made her smile, and before long she had devised a plan. She decided to book a room at James's hotel under a fake name. It would be playful, secretive, and just the kind of thing to reignite the romance between them. She imagined James walking into the luxurious suite, surprised to find her waiting there, and the two of them laughing about how sneaky she had been. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. The next day, Karoline spent hours preparing for her little escapade. She picked out a simple yet elegant outfit, a pair of jeans, a stylish blouse, and a scarf to cover her hair, and made sure to leave behind anything that might give her identity away. She even practiced introducing herself as Claire Bennett, the name she had chosen for her alias. By the time she was ready to leave, her heart was racing with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. This was unlike anything she had ever done before, and the thrill of stepping outside her comfort zone was intoxicating. When Karoline arrived at the hotel, she paused for a moment outside the grand entrance. The building stood tall and imposing, its glass facade gleaming in the sunlight. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm and composed. Pushing open the heavy doors, she stepped inside and was immediately greeted by the opulence of the lobby. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light over marble floors, and the air carried a faint scent of fresh flowers. Karoline walked confidently toward the reception desk, her heels clicking softly against the polished surface beneath her feet. At the desk sat Lisa, a young receptionist known for her progressive attitude and friendly demeanor. Lisa looked up as Karoline approached, offering a warm smile. "Good afternoon. How may I assist you today?" she asked cheerfully. Karoline returned the smile, feeling a flutter of nerves but determined to stick to her plan. "Hi, I have a reservation under Claire Bennett," she said, keeping her voice steady. Lisa nodded and began typing on her computer, glancing briefly at Karoline as she worked. Something about the guest struck her as familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself or the subtle elegance in her appearance. Whatever it was, Lisa dismissed the thought and focused on completing the check-in process. Without giving it much thought, Lisa skipped several important steps. Instead of carefully verifying the reservation or asking for additional identification, she assumed that someone as poised and well-dressed as Karoline must be a VIP client seeking privacy. In her eagerness to provide exceptional service, Lisa bypassed the usual protocols and handed over the keycard to the hotel's most luxurious suite. "Here you go, Ms. Bennett. Enjoy your stay," she said brightly, unaware of the massive mistake she had just made. Karoline accepted the keycard with a polite nod, thanking Lisa before heading toward the elevators. As the doors closed behind her, she allowed herself a small, triumphant grin. So far, everything was going according to plan. Back at the reception desk, however, Lisa's smile faltered as reality began to sink in. A notification popped up on her screen, alerting her that the suite she had just assigned to Karoline was reserved for a famous author who was scheduled to arrive within the hour. Panic gripped her as she realized the gravity of her error. Not only had she double-booked the room, but the author in question was known for being notoriously difficult to please. If he discovered what had happened, it could spell disaster for both Lisa and the hotel. Frantically, she tried calling the room to explain the situation and ask the guest to relocate, but there was no answer. With time running out and the author's arrival imminent, Lisa knew she had to think quickly, or face the consequences. Meanwhile, Karoline stepped into the suite and was immediately awestruck by its beauty. The room was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. Fresh lilies adorned the coffee table, their fragrance filling the air, and a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket on the dining table. A handwritten note rested on the bedside table, welcoming her to enjoy a special evening. For a moment, Karoline forgot all about her nerves and simply soaked in the luxury surrounding her. This was exactly what she had hoped for, a space where she and James could reconnect and create new memories together. Feeling giddy with excitement, Karoline pulled out her phone and sent James a text message. "Meet me in suite 1205 after work. Wear your best smile." She hit send and waited, imagining his reaction when he arrived. Would he be surprised? Amused? Maybe even a little flustered? The thought made her laugh softly to herself. She wandered around the suite, admiring the intricate details, the plush rugs, the ornate furniture, the delicate artwork hanging on the walls. Everything was perfect, and for the first time in weeks she felt truly alive. But perfection, as Karoline would soon discover, is often fleeting. Unbeknownst to her, chaos was brewing downstairs. Lisa's frantic attempts to resolve the situation had only added to the tension, and now the real VIP, the famous author, was moments away from arriving. His reputation preceded him, and stories of his temper tantrums were legendary among hotel staff. Lisa braced herself for the inevitable confrontation, knowing full well that this could end badly for everyone involved. Little did she know that the events unfolding that evening would not only test her professionalism, but also reveal unexpected truths about human nature, relationships, and the power of forgiveness. James Leavitt had just wrapped up a long day at work when he received Karoline's cryptic text message. He stared at the screen, his brow furrowing slightly as he tried to make sense of it. Suite 1205? What on earth was she up to now? James couldn't deny that his curiosity was piqued. Karoline wasn't one for surprises, and her playful tone in the message hinted at something out of the ordinary. A part of him felt a flicker of excitement. He loved how unpredictable she could be sometimes, but another part wondered if this was some elaborate prank or test. Either way, he decided to play along. As he drove to the hotel, James found himself reflecting on their relationship. They had been married for nearly a decade, and while he wouldn't trade a single moment of their life together, he couldn't ignore the fact that things had grown quieter between them over the years. Their conversations were still meaningful, their love unwavering, but there was an undeniable absence of spontaneity. Life had become predictable, comfortable, and perhaps a little too routine. Was this Karoline's way of shaking things up? If so, he appreciated the effort more than words could express. When James arrived at the hotel, he parked his car and made his way inside. The lobby buzzed with activity, guests mingling around the seating area while staff members moved briskly about their tasks. He nodded politely at a few familiar faces before heading toward the elevators. As the doors slid shut behind him, he glanced at his reflection in the mirrored walls and adjusted his tie. Whatever awaited him upstairs, he wanted to look presentable. After all, Karoline always noticed the little details. Meanwhile, back in Suite 1205, Karoline was pacing nervously. She had spent the past hour arranging everything just right, the champagne chilling, the lights dimmed, soft music playing in the background. Yet despite her efforts, anxiety began to creep in. What if James didn't understand what she was trying to do? What if he thought it was silly or unnecessary? Doubts swirled in her mind, threatening to overshadow the excitement she had felt earlier. She shook her head, determined not to let negativity ruin the moment. This was supposed to be fun, spontaneous, and romantic, a chance for them to reconnect on a deeper level. Just as Karoline was about to check her phone again, there was a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly smoothed down, her blouse before opening it. Standing there was James, looking every bit as handsome as she remembered. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the lavish surroundings, then softened as they met hers. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice tinged with amusement. Karoline grinned sheepishly. "Surprise," she said simply, stepping aside to let him in. James entered the suite, taking in the elegant decor and thoughtful touches. "Did you rent this place?" he asked, turning to face her. Karoline hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to reveal. "Let's just say I wanted to do something different," she replied evasively. James chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Only you would think of something like this," he said, pulling her into a hug. Karoline melted into his embrace, feeling some of her earlier doubts fade away. For now, everything seemed perfect. But downstairs, chaos was reaching its peak. Lisa, the receptionist, was frantically trying to salvage the situation. The famous author had arrived, accompanied by two stern-looking assistants who wasted no time in demanding access to the VIP suite. When Lisa informed them that the room was already occupied, their reactions were immediate and explosive. "What do you mean it's occupied?" one of the assistants snapped, glaring at her. "This suite was specifically reserved months ago. How could you possibly mess this up?" Lisa stammered, her face flushed with embarrassment. I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. I'll fix it right away." But her words only fueled the anger of the group. The author himself remained silent, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression unreadable. It was clear that he was not someone accustomed to being inconvenienced, and the longer the issue dragged on, the more agitated everyone became. Realizing that she couldn't resolve the matter alone, Lisa called for her manager, hoping someone higher up could diffuse the tension. Within minutes, the hotel's general manager appeared, visibly flustered. He listened intently as Lisa explained the situation, his eyes widening in horror as he grasped the severity of the error. Without wasting another second, he instructed Lisa to accompany him upstairs to address the issue directly. Back in suite 1205, Karoline and James were laughing and reminiscing about old times. They sat side by side on the plush couch, sipping champagne and sharing stories from their early days together. For a brief moment, it felt as though nothing else mattered. The world outside faded away, leaving only the two of them in their own private bubble. Karoline felt a surge of gratitude for James, for their shared history, and for the opportunity to create new memories together. Their peaceful evening was abruptly interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Both Karoline and James froze, exchanging puzzled glances. Who could it be? Reluctantly, Karoline stood and opened the door to find Lisa and the general manager standing there, their expressions grim. Behind them loomed the famous author and his entourage, their presence commanding and intimidating. "I'm so sorry to disturb you," the general manager began, his tone apologetic yet firm. "But there appears to have been a mistake. This suite was reserved for Mr. Harrison here, and we need to relocate you to another room immediately." Karoline's stomach dropped as she processed his words. Mistake? Relocate? She glanced at James, who looked equally baffled. Before either of them could respond, the author stepped forward, his piercing gaze fixed on Karoline. "If you don't mind me asking, who exactly are you?" he demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. Karoline hesitated, caught off guard by the question. Should she admit the truth, that she was the owner's wife playing a harmless prank, or try to maintain her cover? In the end, honesty won out. "My name is Karoline Leavitt," she said quietly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Gasps rippled through the group, followed by stunned silence. Even James raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her admission. The general manager looked mortified, realizing the gravity of the situation. Not only had a guest been wrongly assigned to the VIP suite, but it turned out to be none other than the owner's spouse. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, unexpectedly, the author broke the tension with a laugh. "Well, this certainly is a twist," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. To everyone's astonishment, he didn't seem angry. In fact, he appeared almost amused. "I suppose we can chalk this up to fate," he added, shrugging. "Or maybe my publisher will get a kick out of the story." The atmosphere shifted, dramatically after that. With the author's unexpected leniency, the situation became less about blame and more about finding a solution. The general manager offered to move Karoline and James to an even more luxurious suite, complete with additional amenities to compensate for the inconvenience. Lisa, still red-faced with shame, apologized profusely, vowing to double-check procedures in the future. And Karoline, though embarrassed, couldn't help but see the humor in the whole ordeal. As the group dispersed and the dust settled, Karoline and James found themselves alone once again. They exchanged a look, then burst into laughter. "Well, that was eventful," James said, raising his glass in a mock toast. Karoline smiled, feeling a renewed sense of connection with him. Despite the chaos, the evening had achieved its purpose. It reminded them both of the importance of embracing life's unpredictability. Sometimes the best moments come from the most unexpected places. As the evening unfolded, Karoline and James found themselves reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had turned what was supposed to be a quiet romantic getaway into something far more chaotic and, surprisingly, memorable. After the initial shock of the mix-up wore off, they both realized how much they had laughed during those tense moments downstairs. It wasn't every day that you accidentally impersonated a VIP client or faced down an irate author in your own husband's hotel. For Karoline, it felt like a reminder that life didn't always go according to plan, and sometimes that was exactly what made it beautiful. James leaned back against the plush couch in their new suite, which was even grander than the first one. The room boasted sweeping views of the city skyline, with a private balcony overlooking the glittering lights below. A fire crackled softly in the corner, adding warmth to the already luxurious atmosphere. He glanced at Karoline, who sat cross-legged, on the floor sipping champagne from a crystal flute. She looked relaxed now, her earlier nervousness replaced by a quiet contentment. "You know," he said finally, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "I think I prefer this version of our date night." Karoline raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, really? You wouldn't have preferred a nice, normal dinner without all the drama?" she teased, though there was a hint of curiosity in her voice. James chuckled, shaking his head. "Not at all. Sure, things got a little complicated, but look at us now. We're sitting here laughing about it, sharing stories, and just enjoying each other's company. That's not something we've done in a while." His words struck a chord with Karoline, and she nodded slowly. He was right. They had been so caught up in the routines of daily life that they hadn't taken the time to simply be together. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Instead, they let the weight of the evening settle around them, filling the gaps where words weren't necessary. Outside, the city buzzed with activity, but inside the suite, everything felt still and serene. It was as if the chaos of the past few hours had stripped away any pretenses, leaving only the core of their relationship intact. Karoline couldn't help but feel grateful for the way things had turned out, even if it hadn't been part of the original plan. Meanwhile, downstairs, in the lobby, Lisa was having a very different kind of evening. The young receptionist sat at her desk, her face buried in her hands as she replayed the events over and over in her mind. How could she have been so careless? Assigning the wrong room to a guest was bad enough, but doing so to the owner's wife? It was beyond embarrassing. She cringed at the thought of facing Mr. Leavitt tomorrow, knowing full well that he would hear about the incident sooner or later. Her job might not even be safe after this fiasco. The general manager had tried to reassure her, saying that mistakes happened and that everyone involved had handled the situation maturely. But Lisa knew better. In the hospitality industry, especially at a high-end establishment like this, mistakes could cost reputations and careers. She sighed heavily, staring blankly at the computer screen in front of her. What was worse was that she had prided herself on being detail-oriented and professional. Yet tonight, she had let her assumptions get the better of her, skipping crucial steps because she thought she could judge someone based on appearances alone. It was a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. Upstairs, Karoline and James continued to talk, delving deeper into topics they hadn't discussed in ages. They reminisced about their early days of dating, the spontaneous road trips, the late-night conversations, the shared dreams of building a life together. They also talked about the present, acknowledging the challenges they had faced over the years and how those experiences had shaped them as individuals and as a couple. There were no accusations, no bitterness, just honesty and vulnerability. By the end of the conversation, they both felt lighter, as though they had cleared away layers of unspoken thoughts and emotions. At one point, James stood up and walked over to the balcony doors, opening them to let in the cool night air. He gestured for Karoline to join him, and she did, wrapping a soft blanket around her shoulders as she stepped outside. Together, they gazed out at the sprawling cityscape, its lights twinkling like stars against the dark horizon. "Do you remember when we used to dream about living somewhere like this?" James asked softly, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of traffic. Karoline smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Of course I do. Back then it felt impossible, but look at us now. We've built so much more than we ever imagined." Their conversation eventually drifted toward the future. They talked about goals they wanted to achieve, places they wanted to visit, and adventures they hoped to share. It was refreshing to focus on possibilities rather than limitations, and Karoline felt a renewed sense of excitement about what lay ahead. For too long they had allowed the monotony of everyday life to overshadow their dreams. Tonight reminded them that it was never too late to start dreaming again. Back at the reception desk, Lisa was still grappling with her mistake. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the lobby grew quieter, giving her plenty of time to reflect. She thought about the famous author, whose unexpected grace had saved her from what could have been a career-ending disaster. She thought about Karoline, whose kindness and humor had diffused the tension despite the awkwardness of the situation. And she thought about herself, wondering how she could prevent such errors in the future. Perhaps this experience would make her a better receptionist, not just in terms of following protocols, but in understanding people better. By the time her shift ended, Lisa had resolved to approach her work with greater care and humility. She realized that hospitality wasn't just about providing excellent service. It was about connecting with guests on a human level, anticipating their needs, and treating them with respect, regardless of who they were. As she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave, she felt a small sense of hope. Yes, she had made a massive mistake, but maybe it was also an opportunity to grow. Up in the suite, Karoline and James decided to call it a night. They climbed into the king-sized bed surrounded by plush pillows and silky sheets and turned off the lights. The room was silent except for the faint sound of the city outside. As they lay there, holding hands, Karoline whispered, "Thank you for coming tonight." James squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for planning it," he replied. "Even with all the craziness, it was exactly what we needed." And perhaps that was the true magic of the evening. It wasn't about perfection or elaborate gestures. It was about showing up for each other, embracing imperfections, and finding joy in the unexpected. Karoline drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, feeling closer to James than she had in months. Tomorrow, they would wake up to a brand new day, ready to tackle whatever challenges came their way. But for now, they were content to simply exist in this moment, wrapped in the warmth of love and laughter. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxurious suite, casting golden streaks across the room. Karoline stirred awake, her mind slowly piecing together the events of the previous evening. For a moment, she lay there in silence, savoring the softness of the bed and the warmth of James's arm draped casually over her waist. Then reality began to seep in. The mix-up at the reception desk, the confrontation with the famous author, the unexpected laughter that had followed. It all felt surreal now, like a scene from a movie rather than something that had actually happened. James woke up soon after, blinking against the brightness of the morning light. He stretched lazily before turning to look at Karoline, who was already sitting up and pulling her hair into a loose ponytail. "Good morning," he said with a sleepy smile. Karoline grinned back, her eyes sparkling mischievously. "Well, technically it's not such a good morning for Lisa downstairs," she joked, referring to the receptionist whose mistake had set off the chain of events. James chuckled, shaking his head. "Poor girl. I can't imagine what she's going through right now." Downstairs in the lobby, Lisa was indeed having a rough start to her day. The night shift had ended hours ago, but she hadn't been able to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, images of the chaotic scene replayed in her mind: the angry assistants, the skeptical author, and most of all, Karoline standing there looking both embarrassed and amused. She knew she couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. Sooner or later she would have to face James Leavitt himself. As much as she dreaded it, she also understood that accountability was part of the job. Lisa arrived at work earlier than usual, hoping to get ahead of any potential fallout. To her relief, the general manager greeted her warmly and assured her that Mr. Leavitt had already been informed about the incident. "He seemed more amused than upset," the manager said, offering a small smile. "But you should still expect him to address it personally today." Lisa nodded, her stomach twisting with nerves. She appreciated the reassurance, but nothing could fully prepare her for the conversation ahead. Back upstairs, Karoline and James were enjoying a leisurely breakfast served in their suite. A tray laden with fresh fruit, pastries, and steaming coffee had been delivered to their door, and they sat side by side on the couch, nibbling on croissants and sharing stories about their morning routines. "Do you think we'll ever tell people about this?" James asked suddenly, gesturing vaguely toward the room around them. Karoline laughed, nearly spilling her coffee. "Are you kidding? This is going straight into our family lore. Imagine telling our kids someday. Your mom once pretended to be a secret guest at your dad's hotel." James joined in her laughter, imagining how absurd the story would sound years down the line. But beneath the humor, he felt a deeper appreciation for the way the evening had unfolded. Life rarely went according to plan, and sometimes the best moments came from the most unexpected places. Their impromptu adventure had reminded him of that truth and of the importance of embracing spontaneity, even when it led to chaos. As they finished their meal, James glanced at his watch and sighed. "I suppose I should head down to the office soon," he said reluctantly. Karoline nodded, understanding that responsibilities couldn't wait forever. "Go ahead," she replied, giving him a playful nudge. "But don't forget to give Lisa a break. She's probably beating herself up over this already." James smiled, touched by her compassion. "Don't worry. I'll make sure she knows it's okay." When James entered the hotel lobby a short while later, Lisa immediately spotted him and froze, her heart pounding. She approached him hesitantly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Leavitt," she began, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to apologize again for last night. I made a huge mistake, and I promise it won't happen again." James studied her face for a moment, noting the genuine remorse in her expression. He softened, offering her a reassuring smile. "It's all right, Lisa. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we learn from them." His words caught her off guard, and she blinked back tears of gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. James nodded, adding, "Besides, my wife seems to think the whole thing was pretty entertaining. Maybe we'll even turn it into a funny anecdote someday." Lisa managed a weak laugh, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. She hadn't expected forgiveness so easily, but it gave her hope that she could move forward without dwelling on her error. Meanwhile, Karoline decided to take advantage of her free morning by exploring the hotel. Though she had visited countless times before, she rarely took the opportunity to wander its halls as a guest rather than an owner's wife. Today, however, she wanted to see things from a different perspective, to experience the space as someone else might. She wandered through the art gallery on the second floor, admired the intricate details of the chandeliers in the ballroom, and even stopped to chat with a few staff members along the way. One encounter stood out in particular. As she strolled, Past the concierge desk, she struck up a conversation with a young employee named Mia, who eagerly shared stories about her experiences working at the hotel. Karoline listened intently, fascinated by the passion and dedication these individuals brought to their roles. It reminded her of why she and James had poured so much effort into creating a welcoming environment for both guests and employees alike. By the time she returned to the suite, she felt reinvigorated, her appreciation for the hotel and its people stronger than ever. Later that afternoon, James rejoined Karoline in the suite, carrying a stack of documents under one arm. "Work calls," he said apologetically, setting the papers down on the coffee table. Karoline waved him off, unfazed. "Take your time," she replied, settling onto the balcony with a book. Despite the pile of tasks in front of him, James found himself glancing up frequently, watching Karoline as she flipped through the pages. There was something comforting about seeing her so relaxed, so at peace. It was a stark contrast to the version of her he had seen lately, the one weighed down by responsibilities and routines. By evening, they decided to venture out of the hotel for dinner, eager to explore the city together. They chose a cozy restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of downtown, where candlelight flickered softly against exposed brick walls. Over plates of gourmet food and glasses of wine, they continued their conversations from the night before, diving deeper into topics they hadn't explored in years. They talked about their individual aspirations, their shared goals, and the legacy they hoped to leave behind, not just within their family but in the community as well. As the meal drew to a close, James reached across the table and took Karoline's hand in his. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I think last night taught us something important. Sometimes the best memories aren't planned. They're accidental. And maybe that's okay." Karoline squeezed his hand, smiling warmly. "I couldn't agree more," she said. "Let's promise to keep making those kinds of memories no matter how messy they might be." Walking back to the hotel hand in hand, they felt a renewed sense of connection, a reminder that life's unpredictability was not something to fear, but to embrace. The mix-up at the reception desk, the confrontation with the author, the laughter, and apologies, all of it had woven together into a tapestry of shared experiences that brought them closer than ever. And though neither of them could predict what the future held, they were ready to face it together, one spontaneous moment at a time. As the week progressed, Karoline and James found themselves slipping into a rhythm that felt both familiar and refreshingly new. The events of their impromptu hotel stay lingered in their minds, not as an embarrassing blunder, but as a turning point. A moment that had nudged them out of their comfort zones and reminded them of what truly mattered. They began to approach their days with a renewed sense of purpose, making small yet meaningful changes to prioritize each other amidst the busyness of life. Karoline started by carving out time for herself, something she hadn't done in years. She signed up for a painting class at a local art studio, a hobby she had always wanted to explore but never pursued. At first, she was hesitant, worried about whether she'd be any good or if it would feel like a waste of time. But as she dipped her brush into vibrant colors and let her imagination guide her strokes, she discovered a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in ages. Each session left her feeling lighter, more inspired, and eager to share her creations with James when she returned home. James, too, made an effort to shake up his routine. He decided to take early mornings off twice a week to join Karoline for breakfast at their favorite cafe. It became their sacred time together, a chance to talk, without distractions, to laugh over shared jokes and simply enjoy each other's company. These quiet moments were simple but profound, filling the gaps that had formed between them over the years. Even the staff at the cafe noticed the change. They often exchanged knowing smiles as the couple lingered over coffee, completely absorbed in conversation. Meanwhile, Lisa had begun implementing stricter protocols at the reception desk to ensure no similar mistakes occurred in the future. She created checklists, double-checked reservations, and even attended workshops on improving customer service skills. Her colleagues admired her determination, and though she still carried the memory of that fateful evening, it no longer weighed her down. Instead, It fueled her resolve to excel in her role. On one particularly busy afternoon, Mr. Leavitt stopped by the desk to personally commend her for her hard work. "You've handled this beautifully, Lisa," he said with a warm smile. "We're lucky to have you here." His words meant more to her than he could have imagined. They validated her efforts and restored her confidence. Back at home, Karoline and James continued to nurture their relationship in ways they hadn't before. One evening, while flipping through old photo albums, they stumbled upon pictures from their honeymoon, a trip to Italy that had been nothing short of magical. As they reminisced about wandering through cobblestone streets, savoring gelato under the Tuscan sun, and marveling at ancient ruins, an idea sparked in Karoline's mind. "Why don't we go back?" she suggested impulsively, her eyes lighting up with excitement. James raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Back where?" "To Italy," Karoline exclaimed, laughing at his surprise. "It doesn't have to be exactly like our honeymoon. We can make it our own adventure. Just think about it. Pasta, wine, art, history, and us." James didn't hesitate. "Done," he said firmly, already envisioning the trip. They spent the rest of the night planning their itinerary, debating which cities to visit and what sights to see. For the first time in years, they felt like adventurers charting unknown territory, rather than a settled couple navigating the predictable rhythms of married life. Their decision to travel reignited a spark of spontaneity in their everyday lives. They started saying yes to invitations they might have declined before, trying new restaurants and exploring parts of the city they had overlooked. One Saturday, they attended a live jazz performance at a tucked-away venue neither of them had heard of until a friend mentioned it casually. The music swept them away, transporting them to another world where worries faded and only the present moment existed. Afterward, they walked home hand in hand, humming melodies and discussing how much they loved discovering hidden gems in their own backyard. Lisa, too, found joy in unexpected places. Encouraged by her manager, she took on additional responsibilities at the hotel, including organizing guest activities and coordinating special events. Her creativity shone through as she planned themed evenings, scavenger hunts, and cooking classes designed to bring guests closer together. Watching families bond over puzzles, couples dance under twinkling lights, and strangers strike up conversations during group outings gave her immense satisfaction. She realized that hospitality wasn't just about providing luxury. It was about creating connections and fostering memories. One evening, as Karoline painted in her studio, she received a call from James. His tone was playful, teasing her about dinner plans. "How does room service sound tonight?" he asked mischievously. Karoline laughed, instantly catching his drift. "Are you suggesting we recreate our hotel date night?" she teased back. "Why not?" James replied. "I'll order the food. You set the mood. Let's see if we can top last time." Determined to make the evening special, Karoline transformed their living room into a cozy retreat. She dimmed the lights, lit candles, and scattered flower petals across the floor. When James arrived with bags of gourmet takeout, he couldn't help but whistle in appreciation. "Looks like I married a romantic genius," he joked, setting the food down on the table. They spent the rest of the night indulging in delicious meals, sharing laughter, and reminiscing about their favorite moments from the past few weeks. It was a reminder that romance didn't require grand gestures. It thrived on thoughtfulness and intentionality. As the days turned into weeks, Karoline and James noticed subtle shifts in their dynamic. They communicated more openly, listened more attentively, and supported each other wholeheartedly. Challenges still arose, of course. Life rarely moved in straight lines, but they faced them as a team, drawing strength from their renewed bond. Even arguments, which had once felt tense and unresolved, now seemed less daunting. They approached disagreements with patience and understanding, knowing that their connection was strong enough to weather any storm. Lisa, meanwhile, had become something of a mentor to newer staff members at the hotel. She shared stories of her own experiences, emphasizing the importance of learning from mistakes and treating every guest with kindness and respect. Her enthusiasm was contagious, inspiring those around her to strive for excellence. One day, as she watched a young intern confidently assist a guest, she felt a swell of pride, not just for the intern, but for herself. She had grown so much since that chaotic evening, and she knew she was capable of achieving even greater things. The highlight of the month came when Karoline and James finally embarked on their Italian adventure. From the moment they stepped off the plane, they immersed themselves in the culture, soaking in everything from the rich history to the mouth-watering cuisine. They explored Florence's iconic landmarks, marveled at Venice's intricate canals, and savored fresh seafood along the Amalfi Coast. Every experience felt like a celebration of their love, a testament to the power of reconnecting and embracing life's beauty. On their final night in Rome, they climbed to the top of Gianicolo Hill, where they watched the sunset bathe the city in hues of gold and crimson. As they stood side by side taking in the breathtaking view, Karoline leaned her head against James's shoulder. "Thank you for coming on this journey with me," she whispered softly. James wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Always," he replied, his voice steady and sincere. In that moment, surrounded by ancient ruins and timeless landscapes, they felt profoundly grateful, not just for the trip, but for the journey they had embarked on together long ago. When they returned home, they brought back more than souvenirs and photographs. They carried with them a renewed commitment to living fully, loving deeply, and cherishing every moment they shared. Life, they realized, was unpredictable, and that was its greatest gift. Whether it was a mix-up at a hotel, a spontaneous trip abroad, or simply a quiet morning over coffee, the magic lay in embracing it all. And as they unpacked their suitcases, they knew one thing for certain: their story was far from over. When Karoline and James returned from their Italian getaway, they brought back not just memories but a renewed zest for life. Their trip had been everything they hoped for and more, filled with laughter, exploration, and moments of quiet reflection. As they unpacked their suitcases and sorted through souvenirs, they realized that the journey wasn't just about revisiting old places. It was about rediscovering themselves and each other. The vibrant energy of Italy seemed to follow them home, infusing their daily lives with a sense of adventure they hadn't felt in years. Karoline wasted no time incorporating her newfound inspiration into her routine. She turned one corner of their living room into a mini art studio, complete with easels, canvases, and jars of paintbrushes. Every evening after dinner, she would retreat to this creative space, experimenting with colors and techniques she had learned during her painting classes. Sometimes James joined her, attempting his own clumsy brushstrokes while Karoline laughed and offered gentle guidance. Other times he simply sat nearby, reading or working on his laptop, content to watch her immerse herself in her passion. These quiet evenings became a cherished part of their day, a reminder of how much joy could be found in shared hobbies, even if one person was far better at them than the other. James, too, continued to embrace change in his own way. He started taking long walks around the neighborhood every morning, often inviting Karoline along when her schedule allowed. They discovered hidden gems they had never noticed before: a quaint bookstore tucked between two larger shops, a tiny cafe serving the best cappuccino in town, and a park where locals gathered to play chess under the shade of towering oak trees. Each discovery felt like a small victory, proof that even familiar surroundings could hold surprises if you looked closely enough. On weekends, they ventured further afield, exploring hiking trails and visiting nearby towns, always eager to see what lay beyond the next bend in the road. Meanwhile, Lisa's transformation at the hotel was nothing short of remarkable. Her dedication to improving her skills and preventing future mistakes earned her recognition among both colleagues and guests. One afternoon, as she assisted an elderly couple checking in, she went above and beyond by personally escorting them to their suite and ensuring they had everything they needed. The couple, clearly touched by her attentiveness, left glowing feedback that made its way to the general manager's desk. By the end of the month, Lisa received a promotion to senior receptionist, a role that came with greater responsibilities and leadership opportunities. She accepted the position with gratitude, vowing to continue growing and contributing to the hotel's success. Back at home, Karoline and James decided to host a dinner party for close friends and family. It had been months since they'd entertained guests in such a big way, and they threw themselves into preparations with enthusiasm. Karoline took charge of the menu, experimenting with Italian recipes they had fallen in love with during their trip. From creamy risottos to homemade pasta dishes, her culinary creations were met with rave reviews. James handled the decor, transforming their dining room into a cozy yet elegant space with twinkling fairy lights and fresh flowers. Together they created an atmosphere that encouraged laughter, storytelling, and connection. The evening unfolded beautifully, with guests mingling and sharing stories late into the night. At one point, someone asked Karoline and James to recount their recent travels, prompting them to pull out photo albums and souvenirs. As they flipped through pictures and described their adventures, they couldn't help but notice how animated they sounded, how alive they felt recounting those experiences. It struck them then that their trip hadn't just rekindled their relationship, it had reignited their passion for living fully and embracing every opportunity that came their way. Inspired by the success of the dinner party, Karoline suggested hosting similar gatherings more often. "Why wait for special occasions?" she'd mused aloud one evening. "We could make any night special." James agreed wholeheartedly, and soon they established a tradition of theme nights at home. One week they hosted a movie marathon featuring classic films. Another week they organized a game night complete with board games and snacks. Each event brought people together in unique ways, strengthening bonds and creating lasting memories. For Karoline and James, these gatherings reinforced the importance of community and reminded them of how fortunate they were to have such supportive friends and family in their lives. Lisa, now settled into her new role as senior receptionist, began mentoring younger staff members with the same patience and encouragement she had once received. She organized training sessions focused on handling difficult situations gracefully and emphasized the value of empathy in customer service. Her efforts paid off when the hotel received consistently positive feedback from guests, many of whom praised the warmth and professionalism of the front desk team. Lisa took pride in knowing she had played a part in fostering such a welcoming environment. One particularly memorable day, Lisa found herself assisting none other than the famous author whose sweet mix-up had sparked the entire chain of events months earlier. To her relief, he greeted her warmly, recalling the incident with good humor. "You know," he said with a chuckle, "that might have been the most interesting check-in I've ever experienced." Lisa laughed nervously but appreciated his lightheartedness. When he checked out a few days later, he left behind a handwritten note thanking her for her exceptional service. Holding the note in her hands, Lisa felt a surge of pride, not because of the praise itself, but because she knew she had grown so much since that fateful evening. As autumn approached, Karoline and James embraced the changing season with open arms. They spent crisp mornings sipping hot chocolate at outdoor cafes, afternoons raking leaves in their backyard, and evenings curled up by the fireplace with blankets and books. Life felt simpler, yet richer somehow, a delicate balance they had worked hard to achieve. Even mundane tasks like grocery shopping or running errands became opportunities to connect, whether through playful banter or thoughtful conversations about their dreams and aspirations. One chilly Saturday, they decided to visit a local farmer's market they had heard about from friends. The air buzzed with activity as vendors showcased fresh produce, handmade crafts, and fragrant baked goods. Karoline wandered from stall to stall, admiring intricate pottery and sampling slices of warm apple pie, while James struck up conversations with artisans and farmers. By the time they left, their bags were heavy with treasures, homemade jams, rustic bread loaves, and bouquets of sunflowers, but their hearts were fuller still. That night, as they prepared dinner using ingredients from the market, they reflected on how much their lives had changed over the past few months. What had started as a simple idea, to book a room at James's hotel, had snowballed into a series of unexpected events that ultimately strengthened their bond. They had faced challenges, laughed through chaos, and emerged stronger on the other side. More importantly, they had learned to prioritize each other, to cherish the little things and to find beauty in imperfection. As they sat down to eat, Surrounded by candlelight and the aroma of roasted vegetables, Karoline raised her glass in a toast. "To us," she said softly, her eyes meeting James's across the table. "And to all the adventures we've had, and will have." James clinked his glass against hers, smiling. "To us?" he echoed, his voice steady and full of promise. In that moment, they knew they were ready for whatever lay ahead, confident in their ability to navigate life's twists and turns together. After all, they had already proven that even the most chaotic beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. As the seasons shifted from autumn to winter, Karoline and James embraced the colder months with the same enthusiasm they had brought to every other chapter of their renewed journey. Snow began to blanket the streets, transforming their town into a picturesque wonderland. The air carried a crispness that invited cozy evenings indoors, but it also sparked a desire for outdoor adventures. They bundled up in scarves and gloves, venturing out to explore ice skating rinks, sledding hills, and frost-covered parks. Each outing felt like a celebration of the season, a reminder that life's beauty could be found in even the smallest details. A snowflake clinging to a window pane, or the sound of boots crunching through fresh powder. At home, Karoline continued to nurture her love for painting, finding inspiration in the stark contrasts of winter landscapes. Her studio became a sanctuary of creativity, filled with canvases depicting snow-draped trees, glowing lanterns, and starry skies. One evening, as she worked on a particularly intricate piece, James entered the room carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing toward an empty chair. Karoline smiled, nodding eagerly. As he settled in, she explained her vision for the painting, a scene inspired by their recent walk through the woods. Listening intently, James marveled at how much her passion had grown, not just for art but for life itself. These quiet moments together were treasures he no longer took for granted. Lisa, too, thrived in her role as senior receptionist, becoming a cornerstone of the hotel's operations. Her leadership extended beyond managing reservations and assisting guests. She fostered a sense of camaraderie among the staff, encouraging teamwork and mutual support. During the busy holiday season, when the hotel buzzed with travelers seeking warmth and cheer, Lisa coordinated festive events that delighted everyone. From gingerbread decorating contests to caroling nights, her efforts added a touch of magic to the atmosphere. Guests often remarked on the hotel's welcoming vibe, crediting Lisa and her team for making their stays memorable. One snowy afternoon, as Lisa assisted a family checking in, she noticed a young boy clutching a worn teddy bear tightly to his chest. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he gazed around the grand lobby, clearly awestruck by the towering Christmas tree adorned with twinkling lights. Moved by the sight, Lisa discreetly arranged for Santa Claus to visit the family later that evening, bearing small gifts for the children. When the boy's face lit up with joy upon meeting Santa, Lisa felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Moments like these reminded her why she had chosen this career, to create happiness and make people feel special. Back at home, Karoline and James decided to spread some holiday cheer of their own. They spent weekends baking cookies, crafting ornaments, and decorating their house until it resembled something out of a storybook. Strings of colorful lights framed their windows, wreaths hung proudly on doors, and garlands draped elegantly along staircases. Their efforts culminated in an annual tradition they had revived, hosting a neighborhood open house. Friends, neighbors, and even acquaintances poured into their home, marveling at the festive decor and indulging in trays of homemade treats. Laughter echoed through the halls as children played games and adults exchanged stories over cups of mulled cider. The highlight of the evening came when Karoline and James unveiled a surprise, a slideshow of photos capturing highlights from the past year. There were images from their Italian trip, snapshots of theme nights at home, and candid shots of them exploring local markets and parks. As the slideshow played, guests oohed and awed, commenting on how joyful and adventurous the couple seemed. For Karoline and James, it was a poignant reminder of how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as partners committed to building a life rich with meaning and connection. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Karoline decided to take her artistic talents a step further. By creating personalized gifts for loved ones, she painted miniature portraits of family members, crafted custom ornaments featuring favorite memories, and designed handmade cards adorned with delicate watercolors. Each gift was infused with care and thoughtfulness, reflecting the depth of her relationships. When she presented James with his gift, a painting of their favorite hiking trail, he was speechless, overwhelmed by the effort and emotion behind it. "This is incredible," he said finally, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank you." James, meanwhile, focused on giving back to their community. He organized a charity drive at the hotel, collecting donations of food, clothing, and toys for families in need. With Lisa's help, he turned the hotel lobby into a drop-off point, encouraging guests and staff to contribute. The response was overwhelming, filling boxes upon boxes with items destined to bring comfort and joy to those less fortunate. On Christmas Eve, James joined volunteers in delivering the donations to shelters and community centers, returning home exhausted but fulfilled. As he recounted the day's experiences to Karoline, she listened with pride, knowing how much their shared values of kindness and generosity meant to both of them. The holidays passed in a blur of laughter, music, and candlelight, leaving Karoline and James feeling deeply grateful for the abundance of love and connection in their lives. But as the new year approached, they paused to reflect on the lessons they had learned over the past months. Life, they realized, was a tapestry woven from countless threads, some bright and vibrant, others frayed and imperfect, but each one essential to the overall design. Mistakes, challenges, and unexpected detours weren't obstacles to overcome. They were opportunities to grow, adapt, and discover new paths forward. On New Year's Eve, they attended a party hosted by close friends, dancing under strings of fairy lights and raising glasses to toast the future. As midnight approached, they stepped outside onto a balcony overlooking the city, watching fireworks light up the sky in bursts of color. Wrapped in blankets against the chill, they held hands and made silent wishes for the year ahead. When the clock struck 12, James turned to Karoline, his eyes shining with affection. "Here's to another year of adventures," he said softly. Karoline smiled, squeezing his hand. "And to us," she added, her voice steady and full of conviction. Their journey had been anything but predictable, marked by moments of chaos, humor, and profound growth. Yet through it all, they had remained steadfast in their commitment to each other and to living fully. Whether it was booking a hotel room under false pretenses, navigating a mix-up with a famous author, or embarking on spontaneous trips abroad, they had embraced life's unpredictability with open hearts and minds. And though they couldn't foresee what lay ahead, they faced the unknown with confidence, knowing they would tackle whatever came their way, together. As dawn broke on the first day of the new year, Karoline and James stood side by side, sipping coffee and watching sunlight spill across the horizon. The world stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities. They knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty, but they also knew they had built a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. For now, they simply savored the present, the quiet beauty of a new beginning, the warmth of shared dreams, and the promise of a lifetime yet to unfold.